I don't even think you would trust yourself at this point.
Of course I wouldn't. If I thought I saw a ghost, I know there would be a better explanation.
Well, real quick, let's not talk about it as a creationist talking point. Let's just talk about it if it's true or not.
Either all the laws that we understand about science and the universe were suspended for this particular girl's pregnancy, or a girl lied about being a virgin.
YouAreMopped. Who fucking names their channel that?
Today's guest is Pastor Will Duffy. Many of you will already know this, but aside from being the creator of the Final-Experiment, Will is also a pastor at a small church in Colorado. Additionally, he is a young earth creationist, which means he believes the earth is roughly 10,000 years old. And while we do touch on that, it is not the belief we wanted to focus on. This conversation is really centered around the gospel accounts of two miracles, the virgin birth and the resurrection. The reason I want to talk about this with Will is because, well, I don't want to sound rude, so I'm going to let Holy Kool-Aid say it.
I genuinely do not know how anyone in the 21st century can make it to adulthood and still believe that this literally happened.
Unfortunately, it's still considered taboo to criticize religion or religious beliefs, and some people are offended by it. Thankfully, Will is not one of them, but if you are, perhaps you should skip this conversation. Quick disclaimer, I am a former math teacher, medical school dropout, and now web developer for almost 10 years. I am not really comfortable speaking on subjects like the age of the earth or the sun. I mean, classical physics and human biology are more in my wheelhouse, but even then, it's been more than 10 years since I've studied those subjects in any real capacity. For this reason, I do try to move the conversation as quickly as possible away from those subjects to one more about belief and the evidence we should require for such extraordinary claims. Lastly, big thanks to Will for speaking with me. I really enjoyed it. I hope you do too, and I hope we can do it again sometime. Because I'm awful at this, I totally forgot to ask what he has coming up or if there was anything he wanted to promote. I know he's mentioned the potential for another TFE-style project, perhaps related to the age of the Earth. That sounds interesting, but whatever it is, I can't wait to see what he does next, and the best place to find out is over on his channel, The Final-Experiment. So make sure you subscribe to him as well, so you don't miss out. Link will be in the description below. As always, if you enjoy these kinds of conversations and want to see more like this, please let me know by hitting the like button and making sure you're subscribed because there's more to come. Okay, that's it. Thanks, and now on to my conversation with Pastor Will Duffy. What's up, everyone? I am back with returning guest, Will Duffy. Will, good to see you again, and thanks for coming on the show again.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, for having me. Appreciated the last time I was with you, and glad to be back.
You have the TFE background, and that's really not the subject of our conversation today. We're going to be talking about science denial, not necessarily young earth creationism, but creationism in general. This is not a debate. This is a friendly conversation. I really do want to try and understand where he's coming from with his point of view. It's an uncomfortable subject, so I appreciate you, Will, for coming on and having this back and forth with me.
Yeah, happy to have conversations. I don't fear conversations like a lot of flat earthers do.
Boom. Roasted.
But yeah, let's dive in, and I'll give you my 2 cents, and you can ask me any questions you want.
Let me have your 2 cents. What's on your mind? What would you like to discuss specifically?
Yeah, so number one, everybody's different, right? People are swayed by different things. If you want to change someone's mind, the best way is to actually understand who they are. You'll have the best success. But most people don't even understand themselves, let alone others. And so they just use the exact same arguments and the exact same tactics with everyone, kind of like a shotgun approach. And they hope it sticks, and sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. So I like to tell people right at the outset that if you want to change my mind, use logical arguments. I think very logically, and that's not like a flex. That's just how I think, right? My wife thinks more emotionally and relationally. And so this actually gets me into trouble in our marriage and in relationships when I don't approach things how she thinks I should, and I approach them kind of more rigidly and logically. It's just kind of how I think I'm wired. So logical arguments will work very well with me. Emotional arguments won't work too well with me. And for all those people out there who think that this is in any way like a flat earther, they're wrong. And again, if they want to provide a logical argument, they can. But the reality is, talking about the present and talking about the past are two very different things. We can be certain about things in the present. It's very difficult to be certain about things in the past. And when it comes to the world of science and experts and PhDs and all the different fields of science, flat earthers don't have any PhDs, they don't have any scientists, they don't have any experts, they don't have any pilots, they don't have anything. But on my side, there are literally hundreds of PhD scientists who do agree with me. I am not appealing to authority here. I'm not saying that makes them right. What I'm saying is it makes the conversation a little bit more difficult. When I don't understand something and I've got one expert who says this and I've got another expert saying this, I, as the middleman who doesn't understand these things, who doesn't have a formal education in science, has to try to figure out who I think is right.
So I will grant you the fact that it is not identical to the flat earth situation. I have been asking recent guests, which is more ridiculous, a belief in the flat earth or a belief in the young earth or creationism. Yeah, I've said which is more ridiculous or absurd, but I'm really trying to get at is which belief or worldview is more unscientific. Most of my guests have answered that flat earth is a more ridiculous or absurd belief for the reason that you stated, that you can observe something in the present, but I don't think that lets you off the hook. So, I mean, your whole worldview, Will, is based on things that we weren't here to observe.
Yeah, so this is a misunderstanding of my position. I am not saying because we can't observe it, we can't know. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is if we're trying to determine with accuracy something that happened in the past, we are at a disadvantage, which is that it's not in the present. So I think we should absolutely try to figure this stuff out. We should do science, we should do testing, we should do experiments, but the issue I see is people want to take a dogmatic stance on the science being settled, and that is false. Like you have to leave room for error, and that's actually how science progresses: is people challenging the status quo, challenging the majority opinion. We can take a dogmatic stance with something in the present because we can literally observe it. And we can look at it and we can do whatever we need to do. That we can. But when it comes to the past, we can just look through, it'd be kind of a waste of time, but we could look through the history of science and see stance after stance after stance that people said was, this is definitely the way it is. The majority held to it. And then it's like, oh, never mind. We were wrong about that. And so the reality is I think the stance that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old?
4.6 billion is the general consensus, yeah.
Yeah.
Apparently it's somewhere in between and depends on who you ask.
I think that position is very weak, and I think that it could easily be something that is changed in the future, could go up, could go down, but I do think it's very weak, yeah.
I think most modern scientists in all sorts of related fields would fervently disagree with you. You have already talked to PhD Tony and Professor Parks about this. I am not a credentialed scientist, and neither are you, as you've stated, so I don't know how scientific we want to get here.
Okay, so let me handle it this way. How do you decide if you're going to label someone as a science denier?
Ooh, that's a good question. I have a book here by Lee McIntyre. This book was recommended to me by MC Toon.
Okay, have you read it?
I did purchase it and read it.
Okay, great.
Unfortunately, that was almost 2 years ago when I was hoping to speak with author Lee McIntyre. Maybe it's time to reach out to him again. We'll see. So often they're uneducated in the science, uninformed. They cherry pick evidence that supports their claim, much as a flat earther would, and they ignore all the other evidence that doesn't support or that opposes their claim. So they might point out how far we can see in the photo of the black swan or something like that, and ignore all of the other photos taken on all of the other days when the refraction wasn't so great. So I would say that is the way I see a science denier.
Okay. So let's talk about that for a second, because this is important. Being uneducated does not make you a science denier. So I don't know if that's what you meant to get across with what you said, but that doesn't make you a science denier. The vast majority of people, including both of us, are uneducated on many fields of science, right?
Yeah, I 100% agree. This includes scientists. If you simply expand the scope from their field of specialty to just all of science, they can be considered uneducated as well.
Yeah, I meant as a characteristic of many science deniers.
Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to see if there's even an objective definition for a science denier. And I don't think there is.
No, sure, it's subjective, absolutely.
So Lee McIntyre spent 30 pages attempting to define it. Also, I should have followed up by asking Will his definition of a science denier. That would have been interesting. I am the worst at this.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's do this. Do you feel like you know anything at all about why the age of the Earth is stated to be what it is?
Sure. Yeah, no idea why I said that. I have a vague idea at best.
Okay. And what is your understanding?
So all of modern biology is basically based on the concept of evolution being true.
So the reason I just said what I said about evolution was because I felt I needed to bolster the validity of evolution because the person I'm speaking with doesn't believe in it. This was actually a weak attempt to reference the famous Russian-American geneticist and evolutionary biologist Theodosis Dobzhansky, who famously said, "Nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution." And said another way, without Darwinian evolution, the entire project of modern biology, including genetics, ecology, physiology, etc., would be unintelligible.
There's all kinds of dating techniques. There's fossil records, and of course I can hear people in the comments saying that disagreeing with me, but there's evidence for astronomers could provide evidence, geophysicists could provide evidence. I think there's just overwhelming evidence. You can date the age of the sun, the age of the stars, everything around us, and all evidence points to things being, at least on Earth, 4 billion years old.
Okay. So I'm going to push back.
Okay, yeah, of course.
And I want to be nice when I do this, but I think most of what you said is false. So I don't think there's anything in biology that points to 4.5 billion years old. I don't think there's anything in astronomy that points to 4.5 billion years old. So I don't know if you really understand where that number is coming from, which is fine. And maybe you just accept it because it's like a consensus position.
Sure. And we're going to run into some problems here because, again, neither of us are experts in those fields. So yeah. I'm not going to try and debate that subject.
Yeah, no, all good. I don't want to debate it either, but let me just tell you my understanding and why I say it's weak. So my understanding is this, and I want people in the comments to call me out, right? I come to these conversations and I say I'm not an expert. I'm open to being wrong, and so please correct me. Like I'm one of the people, and maybe it's a minority position of people that want to be corrected. So my understanding is that there's nothing on Earth that originated on the Earth that dates to 4.5 billion years old. And so some guy, I don't remember when, maybe it was in like the 1970s, dated a meteorite and dated that meteorite as 4.5 billion years old and concluded that that meteorite was created at the same time as the Earth. And so he concluded that the Earth must be the same age, okay? Now, I've got issues with that because we're not even dating the Earth. We're dating something else that science says did not even originate with the Earth. And number two, it's my understanding that the dating methods involve assumptions and that those assumptions are pretty large assumptions, meaning we are looking at something at a very, very, very short amount of time, say 50 years, maybe 80 years at the most, and we're looking at like a decay rate, and we're saying, okay, if that decay rate was consistent going backward, then it would be 4.5 billion years old. And so if we're looking at 80 years versus 4.5 billion years, and we're just making this gigantic assumption that the decay rate was always the same, And then I'll say one more thing that is fascinating, which is that we're talking about parent atoms and daughter atoms. And there's also an assumption made that there were 0 daughter atoms to start. And so I, again, have a little bit of an understanding just from reading things and listening to videos that people send me of where the 4.5 billion number comes from. But I think it's definitely weak. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Okay. So some of this sounds familiar to me, and it sounds like you may have brought this up in your conversation with PhD Tony.
I did, yeah.
I'll put a flag here for that conversation. I am not qualified to debate those issues, and I think it would be a mistake to going down that path. I'd actually rather hear your position on why you think the Earth is 10,000 years old. What's your evidence for that?
Yeah, for sure. So number one, let me start big picture, and then we can get more granular and more detailed. Number one, just like flat earthers struggle to understand and to grasp the size of the Earth, I think human beings in general struggle to grasp time. To me, 10,000 years is a very, very long time, right? If life expectancy is 87 years, that's like nothing. And yet a lifetime feels so long to us. And so 10,000 years to me is a very long time. So that's one for starters, right? This idea that, the sun has been burning for 4.5 billion years old, to me, who's not educated in this, I would look at that logically and say, okay, well, if it's burning, then it was probably a lot bigger. And how big would it have been? And would that have, affected the Earth and the other planets? I look at astronomers who tell me that the moon is moving away from the Earth. It's not a lot. Maybe it's an inch or so a year. But I take that and I rewind that. And I'm like, okay, well, if we go back so long, the moon will be practically touching the Earth. And I know that the moon affects tides, and that just doesn't seem plausible to me. So I do consider 10,000 years to be a long time, but it's not arbitrary. I'm not a fan of holding arbitrary positions. So the one thing people will know about me is if I talk about something, it's not arbitrary. I've thought about it. I've looked into it a little bit because I hate holding things arbitrarily. So the 10,000 number does come from the Bible. The Bible contains genealogies. These genealogies are very precise. They don't seem to be estimates of numbers and ages. And so growing up, I was taught that the genealogies would go back 6,000 years or so, which is where that 6,000 number comes from. But I recently, in the last couple of years, looked into what's called textual criticism, which is looking at the manuscripts where we get the Bible from. And I found that there is significant textual criticism of the Old Testament, not just the New Testament. So everybody kind of knows about the New Testament and the different manuscripts that we have, but the Old Testament is not talked about very much. And so there's a Hebrew text called the Masoretic text that is the basis for almost all of the English versions. And when I originally looked into textual criticism, it was only New Testament. So I just kind of assumed the Old Testament was kind of settled, but that's not the case. There is a document called the Septuagint, which is a Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament that predates the Masoretic text. That's very significant. And then we have the Dead Sea Scrolls as well, which were discovered, and they are the oldest manuscripts that we have of the Bible. So I look at those three now, the Masoretic text, the Septuagint, and the Dead Sea Scrolls, as kind of like a foundation for trying to determine what the original Old Testament was. And there's very, very significant differences in the genealogies. And I think there's a very strong argument to be made that the bigger numbers in the Septuagint would be more preferable to the Masoretic text. And so that gets you closer to 10,000 versus 6,000. So that is where the number comes from. Okay.
All right, so there's a lot there. And before I get hanged by the scientific community, the sun is not burning. This is a common misconception. It's a nuclear reaction, and this has a set amount of fuel, and it does add up to being, I think, nearly 10 billion years old.
Yeah, so little incorrect information from me there. The sun is not 10 billion years old. Good on you if you call it that. It's actually closer to 4.6 billion, just a little bit older than the Earth.
As far as the Earth moving or the moon moving away from Earth, I'm not going to get into that. I know that's a common talking point among young Earth creationists, and it's similar to flat earthers or even creationists saying things like the electromagnetic field is going in a certain direction and the strength is going in a certain direction. If you wound it backwards, it would be zero or negative, but not realizing that it's a wave function and that it fluctuates up and down. So
all I'm attempting to say here is that I know the rate at which the moon moving away has changed over time. It's actually pretty complicated, and so you can't just take the current rate per year and calculate how far away it was X number of years ago.
I don't want to debate all that.
Well, real quick, let's not talk about it as a creationist talking point. Let's just talk about it if it's true or not.
Right. Well, so it's certainly not true that the Earth is, that the sun is burning.
Okay. So now that's good for me to know, because that I did not know. You said it has a set amount of fuel, though. So that fuel has to take up space, and it would take up less space as it's used up.
Just because there's a chemical reaction going, a chemical reaction occurring.
This is exactly what I was afraid of. Even though I said nuclear reaction earlier, I just said chemical reaction, which it's not. They're completely different things.
That it would change its physical size to suggest that it's losing mass. Yeah, eventually, in billions of years, it will become a white dwarf when it eventually runs out of fuel.
I keep saying fuel, which is a terrible choice of words, given Will's misconception here. It's the amount of hydrogen which currently remains, combined with the rate at which it's being used to make helium. At least I hope that's right. I think it is. I didn't look this one up.
That's fair. And then this is a pure question. I have no response because I don't even know what the answer is. But do you know where the 10 billion number comes from for the age of the sun?
Again, I'm not an astronomer. This is I'm out of my depth here. I would assume it has something to do with the remaining fuel.
Oh my God! If I say fuel one more time.
Again, I don't know exactly.
All good. Yeah, all good. I will say this, which is that there's an interesting problem that I ponder regularly, probably weekly, maybe every couple of weeks, which is if God is real, if God exists, and if God created the universe, then that means the universe had a beginning. And it means that if we look at the universe today and we try to rewind what happened toward the beginning, we might actually be going back to the original state prior to God creating it. And so sometimes in the past, I would have like knee-jerk reactions to secular science, saying things about the past, and that was a mistake of mine because I'm like, wait a minute, they actually might be discovering and describing God's action, right? So that's an interesting one. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. So the part of the conversation I was really looking forward to is trying to understand why you give so much credence to what it says in the Bible, right? So that was the second part of your last point that you were making. After you discussed the sun and the moon, you went into what the Bible says. Mm-hmm. This sounds callous, but who cares what it says in an old book? Why does that have any weight compared to scientific evidence and hundreds of years of scientific progress and study and experimentation? Why do you even care what the Bible says more than just any other book?
Yeah, for sure. So number one, the past, they often say the past is the key to the present. So I think if we cut off information from the past and just claim it's not relevant, we're gonna be starting off on the wrong foot. The past is super fascinating to me.
Well, if you enjoy learning about the past so much, I have some good news. There's way more of it than you think. Little friendly joke there. It's funny because it's true.
Now, I do need to say something which is super important. People, I called out Paulogia. Do you know who that is?
Who?
Paulogia?
No.
Okay. I called him out on this. He's a famous atheist, I'd say.
Okay.
He's kind of like a Christian debunker. It might be a good way of describing him. So I called him out on this. Using the term Bible is actually confusing to people who don't understand the issues. The Bible is actually a collection of different historical documents that were written over different time periods in different places of the world by different people. So there's actually a lot more to it. And when we call it the Bible, people think that it's just one thing that can either be ignored or tossed or whatever, but that's not the case. The Bible contains the most important historical documents ever found. So let's start there.
Okay, I'm not sure I'm willing to accept that the Bible is a collection of the most historical documents ever found. Even if I were to grant you that the Bible, I mean, I'll grant you the Bible is a collection of books. That's almost by definition what the Bible is. That still doesn't answer the question. How does that make it a legitimate explanation to how the earth was formed, how old the earth is?
Okay, so that now that's a different question, which is an important one. The Bible has very little to say about the age of the earth, and it has very little to say about how the earth was formed. So I would say this, which is that you've probably heard me say this before, which is that the age of the earth is not important to me. I don't understand why it's so important to people and why they get so frustrated about it. I don't. So I've told people dozens of times, if you want to debate the age of the earth, I would rather grant whatever age you think it is so that we can talk about something more meaningful that actually impacts people's lives, because this is just meaningless. Let me give you an example. I actually told this to PhD Tony after our discussion, because he was bringing things up in our discussion that I just don't think would have even made him happy, right? So he brought up the city of Jericho. He claimed the city of Jericho is 12,000 years old. And so imagine, hypothetically, I was like, you know what, Tony? Great argument. I did not know that. You've presented evidence, which there wasn't, but that's okay, about the city of Jericho. But let's say he did. And I'm like, you know what, Tony? Your evidence that Jericho is 12,000 years old looks good to me. I'm changing my mind on the spot. I now think the earth is 12,000 years old. We've made no progress, right? And even if we used a tree, and I said, you know what? And I think because of that tree and those tree rings, the earth is 20,000 years old. No one's going to be happy. Tony's still going to be upset. You're going to still be upset. Everybody's going to be upset.
I'm not upset, by the way.
So the age of the earth piece is not a big deal to me at all.
I know you've had this conversation, and I don't mean to harp on the age of the earth.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no problem. So I would say that the Bible and the historical documents that it's comprised of are super important because they tell us so much about the past. I can't think of any historical documents that I would say would be more important to history than those in the Bible. But specifically on the age of the earth, it doesn't talk much about it. But because I believe the Bible is true, and that they're historical writings, right? Not fictional writings, I do give it some level of credence when I interpret other data from other fields.
You said something important there. You believe it's true. Why do you believe it's true?
Yeah, so evidence, right? If we have testimony about George Washington, right? Most people believe it's true. And so we have to look at it. We have to look at the literary genre. We have to look at, would it make sense that this would be a lie? Do we have archaeological evidence and physical evidence? And so this is where I think people are going to get into big trouble, which is I've actually studied a bit of history, and I've noticed something fascinating, which is that the arguments leveled against the Bible to try to poke holes in the historical record are never applied to other historical records and historical writings. And so, again, I nailed Paul Gia on this one, and he was not happy. And I said, Paul, if you're going to use these types of arguments to try to discredit the Bible, because you can poke holes in anything in the past, I said, you're going to have to throw out all of history. All of ancient history you're going to have to throw out. And he said, I don't care about any part of ancient history. So, Chris, consider something right now, which is that people that existed in ancient history that we all think were real and they really married this person and fought this war and died this way, the Bible has stronger evidence for the past than we have for all of this other stuff.
What evidence is it besides the fact that it was written down in a book?
Oh, yeah, this is big. So you really don't know?
I know that the Bible is a bunch of stories and secondary eyewitness accounts or stories of eyewitness accounts. And it's the issue I have with the Bible, the supernatural claims in the Bible being taken seriously.
Okay.
So if you want to claim that Jesus was a person who lived 2,000 years ago, that doesn't strike me as problematic. But if you want to suggest that he was born of a virgin and was killed and then resurrected, the evidence for that needs to scale with the claim. And the fact that it says so in the book here is nowhere near enough evidence to convince me, and I feel like it shouldn't really convince anybody.
Okay, perfect. So there's a lot I want to say right now, and I got to try to figure out what order I want to say it in. Okay, so let me go this route with you. Let's say that we have these historical records about Jesus, but there's no miracles. Okay? He's just born of a man and a woman and became very popular. Some people loved him, some people hated him, and then he was crucified, died, done, end of story, but his legacy lived on. Would you have any issues with the Gospels at that point as being accurate historical records?
All sounds completely feasible.
Okay, great. So how do I want to phrase this? I think you're making some sort of a fallacy in stating that these records are not believable because they have things that you've never seen in them. I don't think that's a valid argument.
I'm going to respond to this now, post hoc, only because what I'm about to say in the video doesn't really address the point he just made at all, and just to ignore everything Will just said, even unintentionally, isn't fair to him or the listeners. First though, Will, you just referred to the miracles of Jesus as things I haven't seen before. Did anyone else notice that? I probably wouldn't have if not for the fact that I know you do this many more times throughout the remaining conversation. You have to admit, it's a peculiar way of referring to the miracles. Miracles, by definition, are highly unlikely profound events. That phrasing downplays how extraordinary they are and the level of evidence we should require before accepting they actually happened. Okay, with that, let me respond to what you said about whether their presence affect the validity of the other content. Although I get your hypothetical, it wasn't necessary. I do not think their existence invalidates the other accounts of the Gospels.
Really?
Yeah.
The claim of the virgin birth is a claim about biology. The claim about the resurrection, what scientific laws does this violate, Will? I would be tempted to say it violates all of them. And so, like Carl Sagan said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. The evidence is just not forthcoming.
Yeah, again, so much I want to say. So
Go ahead.
This idea that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence is false. It sounds cute and it sounds nice, but it's false. And let me tell you why. There's no such thing as extraordinary evidence. That's a made-up term. There's only evidence.
Extraordinary amount of evidence?
No, you don't need that either. All you need is all you have to find is one hair follicle in a crime scene with someone's DNA, and they're guilty.
Well, that would be pretty extraordinary evidence.
Why? What makes it extraordinary? That's actually normal. They look for that every single time there's a crime committed.
So after some thought, DNA or forensics is reliable, but it isn't extraordinary. It's used alongside supporting evidence to catch criminals. That's not extraordinary either, so while I agree it's not extraordinary evidence, I think Will is stuck because he thinks extraordinary evidence is a single piece of evidence which is extraordinary on its own. I think that's the mistake here. That's not what is meant by extraordinary evidence.
I know, and it's essentially foolproof, and we've established that through millions of DNA samples and proofs and tests. And
correct. So it's actually ordinary. I'm just saying, based on the definition of words, that's ordinary evidence. That's not extraordinary. DNA is ordinary.
Exceptionally strong evidence.
Okay, great. So what do we use for the past? Now, this is important, right? We can't do a scientific test today based on whether or not someone rose from the dead 2,000 years ago. So what do we consider strong evidence that events happened in the past?
Yeah, I don't have a good answer to that, but it's certainly not that someone wrote down that they heard that someone saw and it was translated. It certainly doesn't constitute convincing evidence for me.
Okay, so that's okay, but I'm guessing that you're going to unfortunately have to be hypocritical here, because if you want to accept Greek history and Roman history, that's all we got, man. Like, do you believe Cleopatra was real?
Just like Jesus, I believe she probably existed.
Okay, and do you believe that what we're told she did, she did?
I'm not that familiar with Cleopatra. What are the claims?
Her relationship with Mark Antony and being killed in the war.
I mean, if any of them are supernatural claims, I would say no.
That's fair. So that's the rub here, is the supernatural claim. So let me give you a logical argument that I think you already have the ability to believe something that science can't show and that has never been seen and can't be replicated. And I'll tie it directly to the resurrection of Jesus Christ.
Okay.
I'm guessing you hold to abiogenesis.
Sure, it's the best explanation that I'm aware of.
Okay, now here's the problem, is that it's not an explanation. So abiogenesis says that life can spontaneously come from non-life, yet no one can replicate it. It's never been seen, and so I would actually call abiogenesis unscientific. And Chris, can I tell you something fascinating about this?
Please.
Is you believe that life can come from non-life when it comes to abiogenesis without any evidence whatsoever.
What?
But you're unwilling to accept that life can come from non-life with the resurrection of Christ. It's the same thing, man. You already believe it.
As you can probably tell with my unusually long pause a moment ago, and again here, I'm pretty confused by how I suddenly believe in an unscientific miracle with no evidence. When I responded here, I still hadn't realized that yet, but what Will is claiming really needs to be corrected. Will, I see now that you suspected and now think that I believe life started via abiogenesis. This is dead wrong. First of all, abiogenesis is just a hypothesis. I don't claim to know how life began, and neither does science. You're the one, Christians are the ones claiming to know the answer to this question, not me and not science. The only thing you got right here was the lack of evidence for abiogenesis. I think that's fair and basically true, which is exactly why it remains just a hypothesis.
No. So the claims that I reject when it comes to supernatural claims have to do with things that completely violate the norms of science.
Abiogenesis completely violates all science.
What claims of science does abiogenesis violate?
Every observation we have is that life always comes from life.
That does not dictate that it doesn't happen. So that's the same argument people make, like, oh, all kinds come from the same kind, but that's just a lack of seeing the big picture. And so you're not contradicting. Saying that life comes from life is similar in that sense. It's like, well, when does red become green on that scale? Well, it does, right? If you go on the color scale from one color to the other. But saying that it doesn't, I don't know. Poor choice of words here from me. I'm not articulating what's in my mind.
It's okay. I'm trying to meet you where you're at. And what I feel like you're saying is that we've never seen someone rise from the dead. We've never seen...
No. It's not only that we've never seen it. That's what you're saying with abiogenesis. That we haven't seen it, therefore it's unlikely. I'm not saying that we haven't seen someone rise from the dead. I'm saying that rising from the dead would violate almost an infinite number of scientific principles.
Like what?
Oh, the reanimation of dead flesh, the physics of cellular biology. Again, I am not a cellular biologist or a physicist, but I would say that the resurrection violates every law of science and physics and biology that a physicist or a biologist could possibly write down.
Okay.
In order to actually happen. So yeah, this is the violation of these principles, Will. It's not that we haven't seen it. It's that seeing it would violate everything that we know. And I think that
Great.
That's what makes a creationist a science denier. Mm-hmm. Because you're saying that all these things are possible despite the fact that it goes against everything that we understand.
Okay, let me try this. Who do you trust, like, more than anyone? I don't know anybody in your personal circle, so who do you trust the most?
Well, let's just say my wife.
Okay, great. I didn't even know you're married, so that's great.
My wife, Mrs. Mopped.
Hi.
Debunker!
Yeah, I would say debunker.
Yes, he's a debunker. There you go, Will. You don't look like a flat earther.
All right, let's say your wife comes home one day and she's like, Chris, you're not going to believe this, but I saw someone rise from the dead.
I had a similar scenario I was going to pose to you. Okay, continue.
Okay, cool. So yeah, let's do it for me after I do it for you.
Okay.
She has no video recording of it. That's all she has is her testimony and her word. Would you believe her, or would you say, I'm sorry, I know science, you're a science denier, I can't accept that?
I would believe that she thinks that she saw that, but of course did not, in fact. No one rose from the dead.
Perfect. Okay, great. So that's what I was hoping you would say, is that you wouldn't believe her.
I would believe her that I wouldn't call her a liar. I would say she's wrong.
Okay, perfect. Yeah,
Mistaken.
Yeah. Okay, great. All right, now let's say you, Chris, saw someone rise from the dead, and you tried to convince your friends, and they were just like, you know what, Chris, we think you saw that, but we know you didn't. And you end up sticking to it to the point where you end up losing your life over it. That to me is compelling evidence that you actually saw that.
How is that compelling evidence, Will? How is that compelling evidence?
Do people die for what they know is a lie?
No. No. Not what they know is a lie. I mean, to me, some people probably do, but but that's not the point. That doesn't make me right or wrong.
That's true, but I will tell you that we have people like the Apostle Paul, the Apostle Peter, who we have extra biblical records on their lives, and they died stating that they saw the risen Christ. And so I do think it's compelling.
Well, here's the problem with that. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of living eyewitnesses who would testify that their favorite Hindu guru can walk on water, or was born of a virgin, or can raise the dead, okay? These people literally exist. So one of the most famous cases is the South Indian guru, Sathya Sai Baba. You may not have heard of him, and he's passed away now. 10 years ago, or whatever, he had a birthday, and 1 million people showed up. Okay, he is not a fringe figure. He's been claimed to have done all of the miracles and possess all of the same powers that you would attribute to Jesus. But yet, you haven't even heard of him, and I bet you're not even that interested in hearing about him. So why does miracle stories of Jesus in a book that's a few thousand years old, why is that more compelling to you than literally thousands of living eyewitnesses that would testify to the supernatural powers of this South Indian guru? Why is that not compelling to you?
Okay, well, you can't really ask if it's compelling to me because you just established I've never heard of the guy. So I'd have to look into it. I'd have to look into the records. I'd have to look.
His miracles are on YouTube. Prepare to be unimpressed.
Well, why would I be unimpressed?
Because they're transparently unimpressive.
Okay, so then that's good evidence against it.
Yes, exactly. My point is that you get all of these people who will swear they're witnessing a miracle when they clearly aren't.
But thousands of living eyewitnesses would testify to the supernatural ability.
Well, you're claiming that, by the way, so that would have to be established with me as well. Like, are there literally thousands of people that say they saw him rise from the dead?
Yep.
There are?
I don't know about him rise from the dead, but raised the dead, yeah.
Okay. This idea that someone dying and coming back to life is unscientific, I think that's false. So we'd have to define what death is. And then there's so many cases of people that were declared dead, they flatlined, the doctors left the room, and then they come back.
Yeah.
So I think we got to be careful about saying that coming back to life violates science. Plus, there's a story of a 3-year-old boy who claims he died and went to heaven and came back. And he knew information about his parents, about the doctors, about the hospital that he could not have known while he was both on the operating table and dead, including that he had a sister who was a previous miscarriage that his parents never told him about. I am not willing to throw out those stories, call him a liar or whatever, just because I feel like it's unscientific. The laws of physics apply to the physical world. So if God exists, he is supernatural, he's spirit, and the laws of physics don't apply to the supernatural world. So I would call it unphysical, yeah.
Okay. You asked me a question earlier, and I said I had a similar question for you, and I want to circle back to that.
Okay, great.
Let's say you have a really good buddy at the church. He's got a girlfriend, and they are saving themselves for marriage. And you don't know her as well, but you know him very well. Next thing you know, well, she is pregnant, and your buddy comes to you and says, you won't believe this, Will. Sarah is pregnant, and we've never had intercourse. It's a miracle. I believe this is a sign from God, and maybe even God's impregnated her. What would you say to your buddy? Would you say that's amazing and I'm sure you're right? Or would you be suspicious that maybe she's not been completely faithful?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I've never heard this before. No one's ever presented this to me before. I do think it's a good question. I would definitely have doubts. The key difference with that story and the virgin birth is that Joseph was going to cut off his betrothal to Mary. So he didn't even believe her. So that's a huge difference in the example there.
So, but you believe her?
Yeah, I do.
Why? How? That's a serious question, Will.
Yeah, it's great.
Seriously, how? You know that she was probably going to be killed for infidelity, and she has every single reason to lie. Mm-hmm. Being a virgin and getting pregnant. I mean, either all the laws that we understand about science and the universe were suspended for this particular girl's pregnancy, or a girl lied about being a virgin.
Yeah, so this is where the preponderance of evidence comes into play. I may not believe her, and I think that that's a fair position to take. She may have lost a lot of friends and a lot of family, but she was, approached by an angel and told that here's why you're pregnant. God is going to protect you. And so she doesn't need anybody to believe her. She can literally have everyone, including Joseph, in the world not believe her, but she will know the truth because of her experience. But
well, she needs certain people to believe her not to get stoned to death.
Not if God's protecting her.
You say she was approached by an angel, but according to who? And why is that compelling?
Well, let's get there, okay?
Okay.
All right. So no one has to believe her. She can live with this, but I will tell you that I bet she did have people believe her. So I would take a different position than you on our wives. And if my wife told me that she saw something, I would probably be more inclined to believe her.
Well, I would believe her.
Well, no, that it actually happened. Not that she was duped and thought she saw one thing, but really saw another.
Mistaken, yeah.
Yeah.
We all make mistakes, yeah.
Totally. But here's what I'll say is that her child then ended up fulfilling prophecy, ended up doing miracles, ended up rising from the dead. And so the people that may have doubted Mary or even doubted Joseph would eventually see the reality of the situation and be like, you know what? She was telling the truth. This is the Son of God. This is someone special.
But do you see that the circular reasoning? You're reinforcing that belief with the other miracle stories.
Yeah. So I find the evidence convincing and compelling. You don't. And that's okay. That's fine, right? Everybody's different.
Yeah.
But again, you find abiogenesis convincing and compelling, and I don't. So I actually think we both have positions that cannot be explained by science. Coincidentally, they both happen to be around the issues of life from non-life. And so I do think you have it in you to accept life from non-life when it comes to Jesus because you already do it with abiogenesis.
Again, Will implying that I believe life began via abiogenesis. It seems I'm beginning to realize this here.
So it's not that I believe it. It's just that I have yet to hear a better explanation.
Okay, let me push back a little bit. I don't think it's that you think it's the best and that you haven't heard a better one. I think there is nothing in your current state that would convince you a miracle happened, whether it's in the past or the present. Does that sound right?
Nothing that would convince me? No, no, I would disagree. It would take the same amount that would take to convince you the earth is flat, Will.
Well, there's nothing that could convince me the earth is flat, so I don't think you're helping yourself there.
And that's beyond.
Okay, so beyond nothing.
Not beyond nothing, just short of nothing.
I don't think you could point to anything right now that would convince you a miracle happened.
Because it would have to supersede everything that I understand about physics and science.
And that's the rub, right? If God exists, he is above science. If you're not going to believe your wife, you're not going to believe anybody else because you trust her the most. I don't even think you would trust yourself at this point.
Of course I wouldn't. If I thought I saw a ghost, I know there would be a better explanation. I trust the fact that I am fallible and I am human and we obviously make mistakes.
Yes.
This happens on a daily basis.
Okay, here's what I think the answer is. I don't think you're going to like it, but I do want you to never forget this conversation. So here's what I'm going to say. The cool thing about God is that he's accessible to anyone. So you don't need me or anyone else to convince you that there's a God. You can reach out to him and he will respond. That's the beauty of God. And so at any point in time, if you really want to know and you're truly searching for God, you can pray to him privately and you will get a response.
Yeah, I may disagree, but that was really nice and kind. Great benediction there by Pastor Will at the end, and I appreciate it.
Maybe, Will, we leave it there and let the comments lambast us. I'm sure there's going to be people who are reacting to this video and letting me have it.
Me too.
Just like they did for cats. I'm going to have to make a follow-up video. Maybe you'll be up for it.
We'll see.
All right.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, there we go. If you made it this far, please don't leave without letting me know your thoughts about the conversation as a whole, what was good, what I could have done better, who you'd like to see me speak with next, etc. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.